It's not sexy and it's not glamorous. It's not about freedom. It's a nasty, dirty, bloody, vomit-covered scab of a life. You know, I held their babies. They slept at my house. I slept at their house. I ate with them. You know, what happens, happens. If someone comes after me, man, I got God's hand on my shoulder and I got a gun on my hip. Like I said earlier, I don't want a problem, but if you corner me or if you challenge my family, we'll figure it out. It's not going to be pleasant. We're all going to the hospital, but we'll figure it out.
Yes, that's the process. Whatever this is, then yes.
Whatever this is the Big Jim Show.
On this episode, I am joined by a man known as Jaybird, J. Dobyns. He didn't just investigate the Hells Angels, he became one of them. For 2 years, he lived, rode, and fought as a fully patched member inside the most feared outlaw motorcycle gang in the world. He earned their trust, he stared down killers, walked out with $1 million bounty on his head. This ain't Hollywood, this is real life, and today Jay will take us inside the most dangerous undercover operation in American law enforcement history. Here we go. Enjoy. I just thought I just need to get Jay. I just need to get him now. It feels like it's the right time. So it is cool to have you on the show, mate.
Thank you. Hopefully I'll do my best to be interesting for you and your audience.
Oh, mate, you just be you. Just do what you do. I've watched a load of stuff on the YouTubes and these things, and they've blown up. And I'm not looking for that. I'm just looking to have a cool conversation with you, because actually your book, No Angel, is one of the only books that I've read. I've read that. I've read Matthew McConaughey's Of Mice of Men. I've read a few, but maybe just 10 books, and yours is one of them. Just picked it up kind of randomly a few years ago when I was in South Africa, but my interest in the Hells Angels and the backstories of that is the reason why I picked it up. So it's awesome to have you on.
Thank you. Thank you for that.
Yeah, awesome, Jay. Mate, can you just give my audience a little bit of kind of background how one goes from an ATF agent, which we know as the police or the FBI or a federal agent or whatever it is, and infiltrates one of the most notorious gangs in history of living mankind?
Well, you definitely don't go from A to C without going through B. When my career started, in 1987, I got hired on a Monday. 4 days later, on a Thursday, I got taken hostage and shot. I'd been on the job less than a week, and I was bleeding to death in a trailer park. Like blood was coming out of my chest like you're holding your thumb over the end of a garden hose. I was dying. I hadn't gotten a paycheck yet, but I knew what I wanted to do. I think there's people in life who are lucky to find something that they want to do, and then some of us are blessed to find something that we have to do. And I felt like I had to do this. From the day I got sworn in through getting shot, I considered it an honor and a privilege to be asked on behalf of the communities I worked in to stand up against predators and violence on behalf of good and innocent people who either wouldn't or couldn't stand up for themselves. So fast forward 15 years before this opportunity to work on the Hells Angels is presented to me. In those 15 years, I had become obsessed with undercover work. And as you know, some of the people in your audience will know, people who are obsessive, like me, I've got bad OCD. But it's a double-edged sword. That OCD, that obsession, can take you to great heights, but along the way, there's sacrifices to be made. There's things that are negative about it. But again, over those 15 years, I'd bought guns and drugs and bombs, from pistols to shoulder-launched rockets, from dime bags to cartel-level dope, from pipe bombs to C4 servo-activated remote control IEDs. I'd infiltrated home invasion robbery crews. I'd played the hitman in murder for hire cases. I would like to think that I was fully prepared for that Hells Angels opportunity. I was probably as prepared as anybody could be, but I still wasn't prepared.
I was literally going to cut you off mid-sentence, but I weren't going to say that you were ready, because you had to be ready, right? Because when you look at the history of the Hells Angels, that I think they started around the 40s and 50s, and the real prominence came in the 80s and the 90s, where the chaos began in the US when it came to drugs and underworld crime and all of these things. That was the time in which you managed to infiltrate them and get the opportunity, I suppose, to be a part of what went on to be one of the kind of most iconic gangs that we've ever seen. Maybe just explain how that happens and what your cover story was and how no one knew who you were and how they kind of missed that, I suppose.
Well, Jim, in the early stages, I'm presented this opportunity. And so in law enforcement, but really for all of us, knowledge is power. The more we know about anything, the better we can educate ourselves about any topic, the more powerful we become. So like I started doing my research. I was never a biker investigator. I didn't specialize in outlaw motorcycle gangs. So I was going through this history of the Hells Angels that you mentioned, through like these worldwide events, like the Altamont Rolling Stones concert, where the Rolling Stones are playing before 300,000 people in Altamont at the Altamont Motor Speedway, and the Hells Angels are literally beating concert goers with pool cues. They stabbed to death a concert goer named Meredith Hunter, who had allegedly approached the stage with a gun in front of 300,000 people who no one sees anything. No one's going to testify. Everyone knows how dangerous these cats are. Like, they don't necessarily have like college educated, book smart PhDs, but they have PhDs in violence and intimidation. The thing that stood out to me in that research, this historical look at who my suspects, my targets were going to be, the one thing that stood out to me is that they kill their own. It became very obvious. They had a long historical track record of murdering their own made men if they felt betrayed or compromised by someone. So that's in the back of your head. You know, this Hells Angels infiltration that I was a part of was 2 years. For 2 years, in the back of my head is, if these dudes find out that you're lying to them, that you're deceiving them, that you're tricking them, they're not going to say, hey, don't come around here anymore. They're going to put a ball bat on the back of your head or drag a straight razor across your throat.
Were you ever scared? And if so, how scared, and how did you cover that up? Because they could smell blood. I imagine these are kind of career criminals that, like you said, kill their own, and I suppose death doesn't really matter to them. They're probably not afraid to die, or they're not afraid to kill. That must be pretty scary.
Was I scared? Very, very simple, very common question. I would love to give you some gallant, heroic answer of how brave and courageous I was. Yeah, I was scared. I knew what these guys were about. Undercover work is learning to be comfortable when you're uncomfortable. You're in situations where your heart is literally beating 1,000,000 miles an hour, but your hand can't shake. They're looking for that. That they're uniquely paranoid. They examine everything. How you dress, how you talk, how you walk. What kind of motorcycle do you ride? How do you ride it? What kind of car do you drive? How do you drive it? Where do you live? What are the conditions of where you live? Like, is my undercover house, is it lived in? Are there bills on the table with my undercover name on them that trace back to a legitimate address? Is it all backstopped? During the course of this investigation, on 3 different occasions, they put private investigators on me trying to figure out, who is Jay Davis? Who is this Jaybird character? But I was so well backstopped. My cover story was so well supported that those private investigators were coming back to the Hells Angels and confirming what I was telling them. Their own private investigators were helping and supporting my cover story because it all tied together.
Well, you know, when you look at stuff, and I'm a fan of George Christie. I've been back and forth with him a few times about trying to get an interview with him, and I think he wants to do it in person. And there was stories of him being the president of the Hells Angels that he had turned the other way. So when you're involved in this chaos, Jay, and I know in your book you mention it, like you're in a room or you're in a bar with people in the Hells Angels that are also informants, right? But it would be the other way around as well. Like I'm sure there's people in the Hells Angels that are working with the ATF and working with the FBI like that. It must have been absolute pandemonium and chaos.
That's an interesting question. And there were occasions where other agencies had run informants into the Hells Angels who didn't know that I was an undercover agent. And so those informants are reporting out to their handlers what they're seeing and hearing and doing. So I'm gaining the benefit and the knowledge of those informants and what they're reporting out to their agencies, but they don't know who I am. I get to know, like I was cheating the game. I get to know who they are. They don't know who I am. But then it's good to like I said, the more you know about anything, and figuring out who's who in the zoo. The Hells Angels have 6,000 members worldwide, 600 different charters in 60 different countries, in the United States, in the UK, Australia, Canada. Whether they like it or not, law enforcement has classified them as an international organized crime syndicate. And so they're everywhere. The Hells Angels have a saying, the sun will never set on a Hells Angels patch. They're worldwide.
Still to this day.
Still to this day. And I would love to say as we go through this, like what a lick I put on them, like what I had done in my investigation, the success of it. The truth of it is, in the end, the Hells Angels ran right over the top of me and kept going. And they're stronger and more powerful today than they were when I encountered them.
Does that not make you worried then for your life? I know that when this all unfolded, there was $1 million bounty put on you. Your house was burnt down. It was, as you could imagine, right, if you've got someone as high profile as you are now that infiltrated the Hells Angels, told the story, and you are still alive and they're still active out there, are you scared for your existence?
Well, if you want to do undercover work, there is a price to pay on the back end of it. Did I expect to pay that high of a price? I didn't. But the tiger doesn't change his stripes. Just because I was revealed to be a federal agent, like the Hells Angels are still violent. They're still intimidating. They're going to keep doing what they do. Now, I went through a phase in my life and my family's life where it got pretty treacherous. The threats were coming faster than we could react to them. And they were legitimate, confirmed, validated death and violence threats. Now that time, to some extent, has passed. Do I live my life looking over my shoulder? I don't. Do I run away? I don't. I'm not looking for a problem. I don't want a problem. I had a job to do. It was never individually personal for me. There was never an individual Hells Angel who it became so personal to me that I was like, I got to get that guy. I'm going to make sure that he goes to prison. I never looked at it that way. I had a job to do, which was to investigate Hells Angels violence and find out who was controlling it, who was calling the shots, who was executing it, and then take that information and evidence and report it back out to a handler who would ultimately take it to prosecutors who would present it before a jury and a judge. All those things were out of my control. I was just trying to capture as much violent crime information as I could.
How are these threats coming to you? And if they still do, like obviously we've got social media, but back in the day when there wasn't, like how would you hear that there's a bounty on your life?
I had everything from face-to-face threats, like spoken, direct first-person threats, to threats that were like, being revealed through the underworld, through informants, through overheard conversations, all those things, and trying to sort through that, trying to figure out what's real and what's not real, trying to figure out if it's real, what is going to be done about it to cap it off. You know, like I had a contract on me, but there was also threats to gang rape my wife. There were threats to kidnap my kids and torture my kids. And not just one or two, a dozen threats. You know, and my agency actually came to me and said, you know what, dude, you're on your own. Like, where would you like us to start? They're everywhere. These guys are everywhere. The threats are coming in faster than we can contain them. We don't even know what to do. So ultimately, to give you a long answer to a short question, good or bad, right or wrong, smart or stupid, I decided to hide in plain sight because you can't run away from them. You're never going to escape them. They're going to find you. So part of my reasoning was to tell my story, the good and bad parts of it. My story is definitely not a hero story. I was not a knight in shining armor. I wasn't perfect every day. I made mistakes. But to tell that story and try to tell it transparently and honestly, and then, you know, what happens, happens. If someone comes after me, man, I got God's hand on my shoulder and I got a gun on my hip. Like I said earlier, I don't want a problem, but if you corner me or if you challenge my family, we'll figure it out. It's not going to be pleasant. We're all going to the hospital, but we'll figure it out.
Jay, be honest with me on this now when you've had time to reflect. I know you've told your stories many, many times. It's been sensationalized, right? Sons of Anarchy, there's loads of movies out there, there's books, there's these stories. And I know that listening to other podcasts and doing some research and hear George Christie speak as a former president there, that they see there's a big difference between being an outlaw, which sounds cool as fuck, to being a criminal. Where are you in your mind now? I mean, are they out and out criminals? Is there any part of it when you were in it where you were like, fuck, this brotherhood is cool?
From the outside looking in, the public views that lifestyle, that culture as sexy and glamorous and representing freedom. The reality of it is looking behind the curtain, or actually stepping behind the curtain, is that it's not sexy and it's not glamorous. It's not about freedom. It's a nasty, dirty, bloody, vomit-covered scab of a life. When I got into it and when I realized the truth, man, I loved it. I loved every day. I was excited to go to work every day. I was excited to see what I was capable of. I was going up against one of the most notorious, powerful, not one of the most notorious, powerful outlaw biker gang on the planet. So the challenge there was, it was impossible. That's how people were looking at it. They had never been infiltrated by law enforcement. That they had members internally who had flipped and become informants. They had members who, tried to save their own neck when they got in trouble, but a cop had never got inside of them. And you mentioned George a couple times. George and myself have become friends over the years. As powerfully as he was, arguably, at least at one point, arguably the number 2 shot caller in the HELLS Angels behind Sonny Barger. George even said, hey, look, man, like this dude had a job to do and he did it well and he got over on us. Like George doesn't come off to me, at least, like he's angry with me. George comes off to me like, you had a job to do. I didn't necessarily like it or like how you did it, but we understand that it's, in essence, cops and robbers. It's cat and mouse. Law enforcement is going to look at us. I guess maybe an easy way to explain it is that if me and you go out drinking all night, at the end of the night, we have a tab to pay. We have a price to pay at the end of the night. My view is with the HELLS Angels, if you want to be involved in gun trafficking and narcotics trafficking, and if you want to be violent and commit murders and assaults and all these crimes that they're involved in, your tab comes due. At some point, you have to pay for that. If you're not involved in those crimes, you don't have a tab. But if you're involved in them, like you're going to have a bill to pay.
What kind of things did you witness? Did you witness the death and destruction? Like you could imagine, like what only I can imagine, and like you hear. Did you witness all that firsthand?
Yeah, from guns to drugs to bombs to assaults. During the course of my 2-year infiltration. I think there was 8 or 9 different homicides that took place, like right on the periphery, right, with people right next to me, with people that I knew that were killed during this case. So from the most violent, vicious crimes down to the most mundane, unimportant violations and everything in between, I became a witness to it.
And how did you stay out of that? Because I think I'm right in saying, I don't like asking the question of have you killed anyone, but from what I gather, I don't think you did. Like, how did you avoid that specific bit, which, again, you think, right, that's how you prove yourself there. Like, is this guy the real deal? Then kill this other person and show us that you're not a policeman.
Well, one of the tactics that we used, which was very much outside the box, it was very extreme at that time, very audacious, was that we used street theater. And street theater is defined as inaccurate conclusions formed behind accurate observations. So I would accurately invite the Hells Angels to participate with me in a narcotics transaction, in a firearms transaction. I would allow them to see a beating. I would invite them to come along on a debt collection. They would accurately see me involved in these crimes. They would inaccurately conclude I was a gun runner, a drug dealer, a debt collector, whatever these skits that we had put on. What they didn't realize is that they were hoaxes. And the other side of these crime events were many times other undercover agents that were playing a role. And so I was inviting them to see me involved in criminal activity. And we did such a spectacular job of setting these ruses up that they had no choice but to believe them. It wasn't because they were stupid. It wasn't because they weren't street smart. It was because we were very good at what we were doing. Ultimately, in this street theater explanation, when you ask the question, well, did you ever kill anybody? We made the Hells Angels believe that we had committed a murder. We fabricated the murder of a Hells Angels rival, which was on the west coast of the United States, was the Mongols motorcycle gang. And we took a member of our task force, we took a Mongols motorcycle gang vest, put it on his back, we dug a shallow grave in the desert, we duct taped our victim with his hands behind his back at the wrist, duct taped his ankles, put him in the grave, and then we had a homicide detective that used animal parts from the butcher shop, blood and guts, to make it look like we had beaten this victim and shot him in the head. And then I took that homemade evidence, that fabricated evidence, back to the Hells Angels, and that was the treacherous part, selling a murder to murderers and making them believe that I had actually committed a homicide on their behalf in advancement of the gang. That was probably, at least at that point in time, the most audacious street theater that had ever been played, at least to that level, and to suspects in an organization that was that powerful.
And how does something like that go down? Is there a celebration when that happens? Is it almost like, well, this is the norm, like, Jay, this is what we do, and it's on to the next thing? Or is there a moment where, I don't know, like, did they celebrate that kind of thing? Or was it just an expectation that there's going to be dead bodies, there's going to be violence, it's our everyday existence? That was the thing, like, with this, because there is a part of me, I'll be honest, where the Hells Angels, people are drawn to that because you mentioned like the sexiness towards it, but that's just mental when you think that you're having to do that to prove that there's been a murder. And you mentioned like the animal guts. I actually saw it in a movie. I don't know whether True Detective rings a bell, whether I think they maybe replicated that same kind of scene, like a dead body, that they'd done that and there was guts hanging out of it and everything. It's mental.
When we were preparing to deliver the evidence of our murder and tell our story, that was a challenging time because we didn't know what kind of reaction we were going to get to it. We didn't know if we would be embraced and celebrated, or if now we were implicating these members into a murder and that now we were a liability. Actually, the first example came true. And this is one of the disputes that the Hells Angels have had with me. And I've never told this story any way other than I'm telling you right now. Deliver the evidence of this murder, and the Hells Angels that I had delivered it to told me, you're in. Like, welcome to the gang. You're a Hells Angel now. They put their own vests on our backs as a reward for this murder. I was told face to face, you made it. Now, there was a caveat. We can't officially make you a member until we take a club vote, a worldwide vote. There was a big Hells Angels world run scheduled in New Hampshire for about another 6 weeks, 2 months later. So I was told, in the meantime, like, act and conduct yourself like you're a Hells Angel. We're treating you like a Hells Angel. We put vests on you to signify that. But it's not official until we get this vote. But at the time that we presented this fake murder and opened the door and made our way in, the case was fairly quickly closed after that. My supervisors and the executives that were, basically running the case from behind a desk just said, man, like, this is out of hand. Our guys have gone too far. It's too treacherous. It's too dangerous. Like, we're going to put an end to this before our guys end up getting hurt.
What about drugs? Did you have to take drugs as part of it as well when you were out with them, drinking and all of that?
There was always drugs present. There was constantly. But one of the stereotypes, one of the myths that I found to be untrue was that all the Hells Angels are drug abusers. Not the case. Like I was crossing paths with Hells Angels that actually were leading healthy lifestyles. Guys that like ate good and went to the gym twice a day and got their sleep and all those things. They had a fitness routine. And so were there some that were narcotics abusers? Absolutely. But when those questions or opportunities or demands were presented to me in the narcotics game, like, I had a lot of tradecraft examples to try to escape those. I don't really want to reveal all the tradecraft, but I had ways to escape that was reasonable and logical in the eyes of the Hells Angels in order to avoid that.
Was there any part of you at any point, Jay, where you were turning and, I suppose, forming relationships within the gang that you started to become comfortable and liked?
Absolutely. You can never undercover out the human factor. Like, you're spending time with people, extended amounts of time with people, with the suspects. Not all of those events are violent crime situations. Like, I was spending time, social time, personal time with the targets of the investigation. I held their babies. They slept at my house. I slept at their house. I ate with them. And so, like I said, it was never personal for me. I never ran across someone who I said, this guy has to go to prison. But there were people that I crossed paths with that I developed an affection for, that I liked. Like I said, like you can't undercover out the human factor. There were guys that I was like, man, like I like this guy. If the world was different, if this situation was different, like, this is a guy who I'd probably enjoy hanging out with.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take a pause just for 10-15 seconds to ask you to subscribe, to follow, to comment, to review the show. If you're listening, if you've got this far, you're enjoying it. I appreciate everyone's support so far, and let's keep the wheels turning. Let's get back to the show. And when it all went down after, and some of the guys that you got close with, did you ever have a conversation outside of the court? Did you go and visit any of them in jail, for example?
I never went and visited any of them that were locked up. I've developed a few relationships after the fact with people who at least are maybe not necessarily understanding, but are respectful of, I had a job to do. I've developed some friendships along that line. But there was one incident that like stands out in my mind to answer your question. The arrests are fresh. We've just done our raids. Hundreds and hundreds of law enforcement officers hitting clubhouses and houses and executing search warrants and arrest warrants. And one of our suspects, the detective, the case agent, tells him, "Man, I got some bad news for you. J. Bird Davis, the gun runner, debt collector, hitman, he's actually Jay Dobyns. He's actually a federal agent. He's an ATF agent." That suspect said, I do not believe you. I am not going to believe that until I hear it come out of his own mouth. I'm not going to believe it until I hear him say it. So the door opens to the interview room. I'm standing there and I said, "Hey, man, today's a bad day, because I'm a cop." And I thought his response to that was very telling. He's like, "I've known you for 2 years, and that's the first true thing you've ever said to me in your entire life."
And how did you feel about that, genuinely?
I never, not just in the Hells Angels case, but any of the cases I worked on over the course of my career, I never celebrated or mocked any of the suspects, any of the defendants. It's a humiliating experience to go through that, to realize that you've been betrayed. Anybody that's ever been betrayed, even if, like as a kid, if your girlfriend decided that she likes somebody better than you, that betrayal, it hurts, it stings. The street theaters and our infiltration, there's a humiliation to that. I never set out to try to humiliate anybody. I wasn't there to embarrass anybody. I had a job to do. I actually tried to react with some compassion. I actually tried to react with some empathy and put myself in that person's shoes, knowing that they had fallen into the trap. And ultimately, whether they were guilty or innocent was going to be played out in a courtroom anyways.
I've seen stuff before around this, and they talk about people who turn, either way, whatever it is, and they call it like brotherhood to betrayal, like that story. And I know you were in teams, you played sport when you were younger. I played sport for 15 years, and you know, that brotherhood that you have, whether or not it's good, whether or not it's bad, whether or not you're a winning team or a losing team. And when I look at something like this, and you look at the police on one side and you look at a gang on the other side, it still has the same but different, but the foundations of loyalty and all of these words that that men have lived by for hundreds of years. You know what I mean? The Vikings, William Wallace, and Robert the Bruce in Scotland. I'm just saying that because I'm here now. And as the years go by, Jay, I don't know what your reflections are when you look at, I suppose, men, and you look in. That men are looking for purpose, they're looking for an existence, they're looking for a belonging. And you kind of just referenced it there, that a lot of these men probably didn't want to be in that position. They didn't have anything else going for them. And they go into this outlaw or this criminal life. And you infiltrate that. You actually break down the barriers of finding a way into that. I just think it's a really interesting psychological existence. Do you know what I mean? Because you did that with what you did. Like, you were in the ATF, you were in sport, but you'd done it both ways. And you probably saw the same traits. That's probably my question. There's very similar traits, right, regardless if it's good or bad.
Brotherhood, like using this big picture, air quotes, brotherhood word, man, it's a beautiful thing. Like, we want to believe in it, and we want to trust in it. And it's motivating, and it's empowering, and all those things that come with it. But I don't care if you're talking about a relationship, raising a family, running a business, being involved in a sports team, a law enforcement agency, the Hells Angels, I could go on and on. Brotherhood is only as meaningful, and it's only as strong as the individuals who believe in it. Conceptually, the word itself, like, we want to embrace it, but it's only as strong as the individual.
And you don't think they believed it? Or do you think they thought they believed it?
I think it sounds beautiful, but they've been betrayed by their own. like dozens of times. They've killed their own members dozens of times. So how do you plug brotherhood into that?
Just tell me a little bit more about that, because again, the more research that I've done, and I know things started falling down here, and I know that your comments and stuff around that have been, I don't know what they have been, like you could maybe tell us, but like that bit specifically, when they're killing their own, that seems to be the bit that really gets them. Like, is that's been proven, and if so, why? Why were they killing their own?
Well, they have multiple historical events where they've killed their own membership if they felt compromised or betrayed or weakened. One of the most spectacular events, like in history, not just in Hell's Angels history, in true crime history, was the Hell's Angels. There was a charter in Canada, I believe in Quebec, Canada, in Sherbrooke, Quebec. There was a charter of Hell's Angels that were labeled the North Charter, that had kind of come off the rails and were doing their own things and were coloring outside of the lines. The Hells Angels executed, like gangland executed, an entire charter of Hells Angels because of that betrayal, because of that compromise. Is that brotherhood? You know, protect the patch, protect the name. I'll give you a personal example. Like, we believe in the brotherhood of law enforcement. I believe in it. The loyalty of the commonality of what we do and what we stand for. There was events in my life when these threats started coming in, the brotherhood evaporated. People that I worked for turned their back on me. People that I work for, like, not only turned their back on me, but went proactive to try to hurt me and harm my family. So I have to ask myself that question. Like, the brotherhood that you lived in, Jay, is it real? Because there were people who violated that brotherhood.
Why was that? I did know about that. So when your house got burned and, you know, you brought out your book and there was backlash from, again, your brothers, your peers, people that you'd worked for, that you'd laid your life down for to try and find justice for good. Have you got to the bottom of that, and what are your feelings on them not being there to support you?
Well, on the big picture, success in any walk of life breeds jealousy. Of all the flaws that I have, and we don't have enough time to talk about all the character flaws that Jay Dobyns carries with him. But one of the things good about me is I've never been envious of other people's success. I've always celebrated my teammates' success, my partner's success, people I don't know. When I see them overcome something amazing, that inspires me. Right? But that not everybody's like that. Not everybody wants to see you succeed. Like your sports life, Jim, your podcast, which is very successful. You have hundreds of thousands, if not millions of fans out there. But not everybody loves you. Not everybody wants to see you be great.
Jealousy.
Success breeds jealousy. Why him? Why does he get this? Why ain't I getting mine? That whole thing. So the threats start coming out, and my agency was underreacting to them. They were dismissing some, they were ignoring some, and I complained. I complained internally and privately and was shut down. I complained externally and made my complaints public. Oh, when I did that, that was the kiss of death. Like, to have someone complain internally about the agency was unacceptable. And there's a handful of people that turned. They took my backstopping, which, like, I had, like, my residence, the location of my residence protected, all that stuff that goes with building a backstory. They intentionally, people in my agency intentionally unmasked that information, made it open source, made the location of my house known. 3 months later, my house is burned to the ground. And then they doubled down and tripled down on me. And these same people built a task force, assigned investigators to a task force, and told that task force, we're going to pin this arson on Jay. Like, it was open. It was so unbelievably unsophisticated that they openly were saying, Like we're going to frame him for this arson. We're going to frame him for burning his own house down. And in saying that, they accused me of being willing to murder my own family by a fire. All of it came out. Like this isn't me speculating or with an axe to grind. It all came out. All the information came out, and who did it and what they did all became public. And in the end, no one paid a price for it. No, it didn't matter. They got away with it. Back again, brotherhood. Is it real? It's as real as the men and women who believe in it.
Are you glad you've done this? I know you've got a hell of a story to tell, and there'll be a movie made about this whole thing, not just the Hells Angels thing, but the aftermath as well. Like, are you glad you did it, or has it been a thorn? I know we're chatting about it, right? And I know my audience are going to be like, "Wow!" If they haven't already heard the story. When I read your book, I was like, "Well, it sounded cool," but I'm not you. You know what I mean? I'm like a guy who played football at school, who is in the police force. He's doing good. Infiltrates the Hells Angels at their highest point, at their highest moment, and then you come out of that. You do an incredible job, and then your own people turn on you. Like, does it make you like? How's your family with it? Like, how's your wife? How's your children? How is your people close to you?
To answer the first part of your question.
Yes, sorry, I waffle on sometimes.
No, it was good. Those are good questions. Would I do it again? I've asked myself that many times, now in hindsight and reflection. And to answer that, I answer it pretty simply. If I don't stand up to the violence, and if people like me that do what I do for a living don't stand up to the violence, who's going to do it? Is my mechanic going to do it? Is my dentist going to do it? Are my kids' school teachers going to do it? Who is going to do it? So would I do it again? Yeah, I would do it again. I would do it better. I would do it cleaner because I know where my mistakes were. I know where my flaws were. I would be better at it. And then to answer the second half of your question regarding my family, like I put a huge amount of battle damage on my family over the course of my career. And there is no one to blame for that. The battle damage, the betrayal, the heartbreak that I caused my family, I'd be counterfeit if I said anything other than it was my own fault. It was made behind my own decisions. And those decisions were typically selfish. I was making decisions for myself and for my career. And I wasn't considering how those decisions impacted my wife and my kids. I was obsessed with what I was doing. The people in my life who loved me the most, the people that gave me blind support, good or bad, are the ones I treated the shittiest. And that's, I carry the weight of that humiliation, knowing how badly I treated people who loved me, who do still love me. Yeah, I've said this many times. I've made a million mistakes in my life, but between God and my family and my friends, they've given me 1,000,001 second chances to try to recover from it.
And what's the one reason why you did it then? So if they say to you, or I'm sure they have, why? Why did you do it?
In this big picture, moral, ethical answer, is because I was standing up to the violence. The violence was overlapping into the public. It was overlapping into civilians, and people were getting hurt and were being put at risk, and that was my job. But that's, like I said, that's a very moral, ethical answer. The reason why I did it internally is that was just such an overwhelming, massive challenge. People were saying, it's impossible. You can't do it. You can't get inside the wire of these guys. You can't crack their code. And tell me that I can't do something and then stand back and watch me at least try to do it.
And that's the thing when you're a young man, right? And something like this presents itself. And you could argue both ways that there'd be few people that wanted to do it, but also in your line of work, probably everyone, if they had a chance, would want to try and do what you did.
And that you hit it on the head. That it was a chance. It was an opportunity that, like, I'd spent my career working towards, and when that opportunity was presented, if I didn't take it, if I didn't accept it, if I was a coward towards it, like I have to look myself in the mirror. Like, hey, you did all these other things, but when it really came down to it, when it was really dangerous, when you really could have made an impact, you took a pass. Like, I didn't want to live with that.
When you left, were you relieved, or was there a part of you that missed it? And you know what I mean when I say this, because if you go to the human element, the brotherhood element, being a part of something, whatever it is, the good or the bad, your purpose, your existence is Jaybird, okay? And then the other hand, it's the ATF agent that's infiltrating the Hells Angels. So it's not just the one job, is it? It's like, it's two. You have two roles of existence in your life, and both of them are high energy. Both of them are cool, major jeopardy, fast. How was it when you left?
Well, what I came to realize is that as I was infiltrating the Hells Angels, I didn't realize it at the time, they were infiltrating me. And when I tell this story, it sounds like every day was a miserable existence. It wasn't. Like I loved going to work. I loved my job. I enjoyed my job. I laughed and smiled along the way. Like, all those human factors don't get defined and separated. Jay Dobyns versus Jaybird Davis, the father and the husband versus the undercover infiltrator. Like, trying to balance those two lives in two such extreme worlds, man, I failed. I failed at that. I failed my wife. I failed my kids. I was a terrible husband. I was a terrible father. I say that with transparency, because if I don't tell you, if I don't answer your questions honestly, and if I don't talk about some of the dark sides of what I experienced, then how do you believe the good stuff? Yeah, it's like I did things wrong. And people that I love paid the price for my selfishness.
I don't know your personal story, but you listen to a lot of people that have been successful, who have done risky things. And look, Jay, my dad was in the Special Forces, and he was never there for me as a youngster because he chose work first. And I've had a few people from the Special Forces on my show, a guy called Jason Fox, and we've had private conversations, and they said the hardest thing, or where it changes, where you are going to be a great father or not in that role, is if you carry on doing your job. He said you cannot be in the Special Forces, you cannot actively go to war, you can't do a job like you did if you're not all in on that. Do you know what I mean? If you're thinking about your family and you're thinking about your wife, you're not thinking about your job, and therefore your mortality becomes more important than the job at hand.
I'll tell you a story that answers that question. I'd been gone from home for an extended period of time, like a long time. I come home, and my wife confronts me, and she's like, you can't be gone and then walk in this house and talk to me and the kids like we're gangsters. In my self-defense, I was like, I can't turn this on and off. I have to be on all the time. People who treat what I do as a hobby, as a gimmick, they end up dead. And then her response was, I understand that you're in some dangerous situations. When you come to this house, you better dial that attitude down. And if you can't do that, don't come home, because you're not welcome here like this.
What was it, a swagger? Was it your words you were using?
Yeah, I was communicating with my family and with people in my social life the same way I was communicating with gangsters. And the delivery of what you say and how you say it is so much different. There's so much more swag and bravado to it. There's no compassion or humanity to it. And like, my family and friends didn't deserve that. But I wasn't able to turn it off. I was afraid the second that I turned it off, like, I was letting my guard down and becoming weak. And as If I became weak, I would be dangerous, not only to myself, but to all my partners around me. You know, I worked on this case with a task force. You know, a lot of the credit and blame, for that matter, has fallen on my shoulders. But credit goes equally to all these other people who participated from behind the scenes. They made those exact same commitments of time and effort and energy and enthusiasm that I did. They just don't have the spotlight shined on them like I do.
Jay, why do you think so many people are drawn to this story and other stories like this? So Sons of Anarchy, for example, I know that that's a drama series, okay, but that's just kind of one example where it's one of the most viewed drama series ever made. But then when you look at your interviews, or you look at gangster movies, you look at the Peaky Blinders that we have here in the UK as well, why are humans drawn to these gangsters, these outlaws, anything from years gone by, Reservoir Dogs, Scarface, like all these stories? Why do you think it is?
I think the entertainment industry, film and television and books, what they do is they allow us as civilians into a world that we know that we will never experience ourselves. And so when that curtain raises and we get to peek behind it, it's fast. The public is fascinated by it. Most people in the public, I wouldn't say couldn't do it, but just wouldn't do it for all kinds of good reasons. They just don't want any part of it. But to get a glimpse of it, you know, through a television show or a movie is fascinating. We've always been fascinated by crime and punishment, by true crime, good guys, bad guys. You know, in the U.S., the whole culture of the West, you know, of Wyatt Earp and Doc Holliday and the Clantons and John Dillinger and John Capone and or Al Capone and all that. Like, we're fascinated by that.
The Hells Angels, underpinned by crime and money. Is there more to it than that?
No, I don't think it's black and white as that. I think that is a part of it, and it's a part of it for a set or an element within that gang. I've heard George say many times, George Christie, he said it to my face. The Hells Angels aren't a criminal organization. They may have criminals within the organization. I can't dispute that in its entirety, because I met Hells Angels who weren't involved in crime, who weren't doing anything wrong. When I crossed paths with them, with those members, I didn't have any interest in them. There's plenty of criminals out there. I didn't need to go invent a criminal. I didn't need to fabricate one or turn someone into something that they're not. There were plenty of viable targets. But the other side of that is, if all the people around me are involved in crime and involved in crime events and doing treacherous, dangerous, wicked things, and I want to wear the same patch as them, and I want to be identified with them, like, I don't think that gives you a free pass.
Is it as simple as saying criminals on bikes? I've seen that thrown about. And I know Harley Davidson, I'm wearing the T-shirt, I'm going on a ride at the weekend. We'll talk about bikes in a minute. But do you know what I mean? I know it was awful for Harley Davidson, but their brand has been built around the Hells Angels, whether they like it or not. But it's criminals on Harleys. That's basically how it's been pinned.
I can't really get behind that. Criminals on bikes. Gangsters on motorcycles is a different characterization. I think they're gangsters. They're part of a gang. They're identifying themselves as a gang. They fit all the definitions of a gang. They wear the same colors. They speak the same language. They pay dues. They have meetings that are required to attend. All these identifiers that go with defining what is a gang versus what is a club, like, they fit the gang definition. But when you say criminals on motorcycles, that's saying that everybody that's wearing that patch is a criminal. I don't believe that. All I know is that my attention was focused on the ones that either were committing or involved in criminal activity, or showing an interest in it.
What about the old ladies and the women in that? And again, you can only go based on how it was sensationalized on stuff that you've seen. But when you cross paths with these people, was it as black and white as the men were the men, the women were the women, the men were the hierarchy, and the women stayed at home and they were used how they were portrayed to be used? What's your view on that?
Yeah, my experience, to some extent, that's true, not in its entirety. There were the wives of Hell's Angels, the girlfriends of Hell's Angels that were treated respectfully, that were treated with dignity, that were protected on the high end. On the low end, there were like these groupie types that were just wanted to be part of that culture. They didn't care how or with who. They were intrigued by that lifestyle. And those were, those women, that's a rough life. That's a rough path to take, because not all of those are treated with that same level of respect and dignity.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about stories, right? And your story's incredible. Like I keep saying that the people listen to this, but some of their stories would be incredible, wouldn't they? The lives in which they've lived, having to bring children up in that environment. Do you keep in contact with any of them? Like, is there stories out there that you've seen where you just like, wow, like how have you managed to get through this?
No, but you know what? Like an analogy that I think is probably offers an explanation is that you look at a sports team, a professional sports team. Those players and those athletes have wives and have girlfriends who are treated respectfully. And then there's that groupie crowd that just wants to be a part of it, wants to be in that scene, wants to be associated with those guys who, for lack of better terms, get taken advantage of and get mistreated. So, are the Hells Angels in that way different than a professional sports team?
One thing that's underrated as well with the Hells Angels, maybe you can share what it was like to ride with them, how they rode bikes. Like that's one thing that I get naturally would never get spoken about, but they rode so close. They're on open road. They're not wearing helmets, and I ride loosely, right? And it can be difficult. They're big bikes. Some of them weigh 200 kgs, and they're flying around with grace and skill.
I was never an expert bike rider, motorcycle rider, and now not being an expert. I was proficient, but like I was a long ways from being an expert. Now you're asked to integrate with these guys who are riding 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 members deep, side by side, where you could reach out and touch hands with the member on the side of you, and you're 18 inches behind the wheel of the bike in front of you, going 80, 90, 100 miles an hour, completely trusting that rider in front of you to be paying attention, to stay on point, to hold his line. You're doing it at night. You're splitting lanes. You're riding, sometimes in pure darkness with nothing but like a feeble headlight in front of you and a pair of taillights. And you're laying on that throttle, and you're opened up as fast as it'll go, as hard as it'll go. And like I was typically in the back of those packs. Like I didn't have any leadership role. I didn't carry any significance. If someone went down in front of me, we're all going down.
Do you ride now?
I don't. I have a motorcycle, but it's actually just a giant paperweight in my office. It's got no oil in it, no gas in it, no battery in it. It's just a decoration. Like I rode my motorcycle in my undercover life, not just with the Hells Angels, in other cases as well. It was more of a prop for me. I never had that unending love of riding, and just like there's these people that want to get on their motorcycle and just ride for hours and hours and hours, and they get a lot of enjoyment out of it. That was never me. I rode because I had to as part of the investigations I worked, not necessarily because I wanted to.
And what about the relationship with, again, it's a kind of random question just on topic around like Harley Davidson's relationship with the Hells Angels? I know that they pushed back on that, and they've been going through a complete rebrand and stuff in the States, but it is part of their history, right? It's part of the legacy that kind of has carried them through, unfortunately.
I'm not an advertising man, or I have no expertise in marketing, but I will say this: whether they tried to disassociate themselves or not, the Hells Angels have been a massive marketing tool for the Hells Angel for Harley Davidson. Massive marketing tool. Harley probably won't give them the credit for that, but like, let's not kid around. A large number of motorcycle riders were exposed and intrigued to ride behind at least the myth or the urban legend of the Hells Angels.
An urban legend is the great way of putting it, and it's like the movie thing. It's unattainable. You don't really want to go into that life of Scarface and Escobar and do that, but with the Hells Angels, there's a part of riding a Harley that brings you closer to that outlaw. That you know where I'm going with it. That you're not ever going to do, but it brings you closer to a world. And the urban legend is probably the best way of putting it.
Well, I know this. Harley Davidson has likely sold millions of motorcycles behind the intrigue that was inspired by the Hells Angels.
Yeah, well, they'll hate you saying that, but I agree with you. 100%. Jay, just tell me then where life is now. We could have obviously done this podcast for 2-3 hours, and maybe one day in person we could do it. But I've read your book, No Angel. You've got another book out as well. But maybe just before you talk about that, maybe just tell me like where you are in your life now.
Yeah, like I live a relatively peaceful life, a relatively calm life. I do training. I speak at training events as a keynote speaker, in conferences, and like both for law enforcement and business. I'm an adjunct professor at the University of Arizona. I teach a class on undercover work. I coach high school football, which brings me a lot of joy, just the innocence of it, and the still being involved in the world of athletics. I play a little bit of golf. I'm not very good, but I have fun. Yeah, like all that information can be found at my website, like information on me and on my keynotes and on my books at jdobyns, DOBYNS.com.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you sharing that, because I know there's so many layers, right? And I know that this is a story that you've told time and time again, but it is the wow story. But I know you're a great athlete back in your day, you know, to be able to write a book and it's a bestseller. I'm right in saying No Angel is a bestseller, right?
Yeah, it did. It found some good success in the literary world, and I'm very grateful for that.
Of course. And there's another book as well. What's that called? I saw, I think George was talking about it, actually, George Christie.
Yeah, I have a second book, which is called Catching Hell, which is also found on my website, which the Hells Angels, the No Angel book, is kind of a case study book. It's very focused on that event in my life. The Catching Hell book is just a bigger picture that tells more of a preamble and a prologue to the story, and just a lot of different things that happened over the course of my career.
Well, that's what I mean. There's two great books. You've got Hunter S. Thompson's, haven't you, when he infiltrated the Hells Angels, very different to you, and No Angel. I've actually just come back from Aspen. I was there with the family, and there's an art shop in the centre of Aspen where there's artwork from Johnny Depp, who was obviously mates with Hunter S. Thompson, and some of Hunter S. Thompson's artwork on the wall. And that's selling for $1.5 million. So get your paintbrushes out, Jay. Start painting, mate. There could be more. I have
to start drawing pictures.
Exactly. Jay, mate, you're in Arizona, are you?
I am.
Whenever I'm passing, I will swing by and
I would love that. Thank you.
Treat you to a coffee and we can connect properly. But for now, we've done it remotely. You're there, I'm in Edinburgh, and I'm sure my listeners would have absolutely loved and been wowed by an unbelievable story. One of life's great stories. It really is. I know you would have been told that, but truly happy to have had you on.
Very kind, Jim, and thank you for the kind words. I truly, I don't just characterize myself like this. I believe this to be true. I'm very much a common man who was placed in some uncommon situations and just did the best I could.
Yeah. Well, Jay, you certainly did. So again, I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jim.